a federal jury in Lafayette, Louisiana, lodged a punitive damage against Eli Lilly and their Japanese partners for $9 billion over hiding lactose risks. Now, what is that? Lactose, of course, is an extremely well-respected drug that's used for diabetes. I mean, it will lower your blood sugar. But everybody who takes lactose gets cancer. They forgot to tell you that part. They conspired to keep that piece secret. And so a federal jury dinged them $9 billion. I thought that was cool. The problem is, that's chump change for them. That's like charging you a nickel for a parking ticket. Okay? None of the guys who were in on the conspiracy lost their jobs. None of them got a fine, a parking ticket. They got nothing. The company got dinged $9 billion, but again, it's like you being charged a nickel. Okay, last ones here, and then we'll get into the diseases. We're going to have to go faster. Okay. Hospital care fatal for some patients. This study was actually done by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services Office of Inspector General, which is essentially the auditor for Medicare. What they did was look at the monthly kill rate by medical doctors on seniors, people who were on Medicare. Each month in America, this is a monthly figure, medical doctors kill 15,000 Medicare patients in hospitals with minor medical procedures and screening tests. Now, how many over age 65 would fly commercial airlines if you knew that they killed 15,000 seniors every month? That's 180,000 a year. Nobody would fly if you're over age 65. But you still go to doctors. Why? Because of insurance. I'll show you 3 people, very famous people, that they killed in the last couple of years who were over age 65. Andy Rooney from 60 Minutes was 92 years old. He and his 87-year-old wife were going to go on a world cruise for a year, and she was nervous. Said, Andy, I'm 87, you're 92. One of us is going to get sick here, and we need to take a disc with us, a disc with our medical records, in case, because we don't even speak the languages of the place we're going. So he agrees. They go into the doctor, and while the discs are being burned on the records, his doctor is going through his papers and saying, you know, Andy, you're 92 years old. I can't see where you've ever had a colonoscopic exam. You could have cancer lurking around in you. And he should have said, no, I don't have any blood in my stool. I'm not losing weight. I don't have any pelvic pain. I haven't had any change in my bowel habits, and so I'm not going to get a colonoscopic exam. But instead he said, oh, okay. Andy Rooney, the skeptical guy, was a compliant 90-year-old guy. Goes in the next day. The doctor sticks a garden hose up his rump, punctures his intestine. 3 days later, he's dead from peritonitis belly infection. When you look online, Andy Rooney obituary, no matter what service you're looking at, they all say the same thing. It was a news release, okay, from 60 Minutes. They said, Mr. Rooney died from complications of a minor medical procedure. Wasn't minor for him, it killed him. And then Dick Clark, from American Bandstand, 80 years old, goes in for a physical, complains to his doctor. He gets up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom. The doctor says, you probably have an enlarged prostate. Sends him to urologist. Urologist examines. Says, yeah, you got an enlarged prostate, Dick. We need to cut part of your prostate gland out. We're going to put you on prescriptions. And I could see Dick Clark kind of arguing a little bit. He said, well, I don't think I need surgery. Well, yes, you do. Listen, Dick, this is a minor procedure. You don't have to stay in the hospital overnight. It's an outpatient procedure. It's like clipping your fingernails, for goodness sakes. You come in at 9 o'clock, 9:30, you're done. 1 o'clock, you're on the golf course, for goodness sakes. Don't be a wimp. And he should have said no, but he said, oh, okay. Goes in at 9 o'clock, 9:30, he's dead. What the doctor forgot to tell him was, when you cut on the prostate gland, it releases a hormone that causes your risk of thrombotic stroke, coronary thrombosis, pulmonary embolism to go up. Well, he won the lottery. He got all 3 and died. When at 9 o'clock, 9:30, he was dead. But my favorite is Neil Armstrong, our top astronaut, first man to walk on the moon, personally saved 2 doomed NASA missions. 82 years old, went in for his physical. The doctors came out saying, that NASA program must be wonderful, Neil. You're 82 years old, but you got the blood work and the physical body of a 50-year-old guy. The only thing we can find is one coronary artery way down at the tip, has a 3-millimeter wide, 30% blockage. You're not going to have any heart or chest pain, angina, because it's too low. It had to be high up in the artery to have the pain. There's really no risk of having a heart attack because it's too low. It has to be high up in the artery to have risk for a heart attack. But it could be a progressive thing. And if you let us, we'd recommend doing putting in a stent or two and doing a bypass or two, and you'll never have to worry about a heart attack from these arteries. And he should have said no, 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 but instead he said, oh, yes, sir, let's do it. 3 days later, he was dead. What did he die from? Complications of an elective cardiovascular procedure. Elective means he really didn't need it. All the doctors went out and had martinis, saying, gee, we killed Neil Armstrong. Can you believe that? Now, if Al-Qaeda would have kidnapped him, cut his head off on YouTube, we'd have sent in drones to blow up baby food factories in case they had biological weapons in there. We'd certainly send in SEAL Team 6 to kill a bunch of people. But let a doctor kill our top astronaut, it's okay. Now, to me, this is the most important part of life. The first 91 days of pregnancy are the most important part of a human being's life. The first 91 days of pregnancy. The first 91 days of pregnancy, the baby's going down an assembly line. And like a factory, say making cars, TVs, refrigerators, tractors, furnaces, whatever it's making, there has to be sort of stations where it has all the parts, and you got a team of guys installing these parts. They're handing them to them. One guy's putting the parts in, then it goes on to the next station, they put in the parts, and it goes to the next station. If somebody has to run to the bathroom, there's nobody there to kind of keep up with it, nobody stops the assembly line, that furnace or that car will get to the line of pieces missing. The same thing happens with babies. There's pieces missing. This is what causes birth defects, because the mother was missing something. Well, whose fault is that? It's the OBGYN. The OBGYN is responsible for every birth defect you can name. There's not a single birth defect that's caused genetically. It's all caused by nutritional deficiencies of the embryo. The last 6 months of pregnancy is just growth. By the time 91 days goes by, you've got what you got, and then the next 6 months are just growth. Anybody here ever hear of things that are called inborn errors of metabolism? Anybody ever hear inborn errors of metabolism? Okay, inborn errors of metabolism are things that are missing during the formation of the embryo in the early stages, in the first couple of weeks of the embryo's life, and the baby comes out with stuff that doesn't happen properly. For instance, how many of you heard of lactose intolerance? You drink milk, eat cheese, eat ice cream, you get bubbly intestines, and it's painful and bloating and diarrhea. It's called lactose intolerance because you're missing the enzyme lactase, because mama was missing something when that enzyme was being formed. Okay? You can make up the difference by supplementing with lactase, and you can take the enzyme and then go knock yourself out, eat all the ice cream and cheese you want, and no problem. Same thing is true with fructose intolerance. Same thing, similar, is true to things like PKU, phenylketonuria, where mama left out the piece that's required to properly break down an amino acid called phenylalanine. If you don't properly break down phenylalanine, the metabolic pieces that are left over that aren't broken down will cause retardation. Now, what you have to do here for this is to avoid it. And so by law, any food product or anything you're going to eat or put in your mouth that has phenylalanine, they have to say, warning, PKU patients, this product contains phenylalanine, do not take it if you're a PKU patient. So by avoidance, you can prevent the disease. Same thing is true with type 1 diabetes. It's an inborn error of metabolism. It's not a genetic thing. Mama was missing something, okay? When the cells that form insulin, the beta cells, when they're being formed, they make insulin, they're not there anymore. Okay, they were never formed. And so the baby is going to be on insulin for the rest of its life. It's an inborn error of metabolism. We have type 1 diabetes. Type 2 diabetes is a simple mineral deficiency. It's easily reversed. Now, in black people, they have a disease called sickle cell anemia. The same disease in white people is called thalassemia. This is where the mother is having the baby go down the assembly line, and when the bone marrow is being formed, the part that makes the hemoglobin, there's something missing, And the hemoglobin has what's called the sickle cell trait, or the thalassemia trait. You're missing nutrients. Instead of being like this normal red blood cell over here, look like a little donut, they will sickle and look like grains of wheat, maybe even look like a sickle. And so you can see where these would clog up little arteries and cause strokes and swelling and all kinds of other complications. And so by supplementing with the 90 essential nutrients, which we'll get into in a minute, and taking some extra selenium and some extra B6, you can prevent people who have that sickle cell trait from sickling. Been doing this since 1991 in people in Atlanta, Georgia, in the Georgia Sickle Cell Foundation. You all heard of Down syndrome. Down syndrome is not genetically transmitted. Down syndrome is actually caused by a zinc deficiency in the first 10 minutes of pregnancy. I've actually reversed them, not after the baby's born, not after 91 days, but Lauren Knievel, Evel Knievel's niece-in-law, called me about 12 years ago, and she said, look, Doc, I've got a pregnancy. It's 2.5 months along. By 2 different tests for 2 different laboratories, they tell me I have a baby with Down syndrome. I don't want to have an abortion. And they tell me you might be able to help me. I said, well, we've done it in animals. We've never done it in humans. And she said, well, I'm not going to get an abortion, so, you know, this is not going to be a problem. Just let's do it. And so what I did was give her the 90 essential nutrients and give her some extra zinc, and the baby was born perfectly normal later on. Done it several times since. Okay, early on in pregnancy with a Down syndrome baby, apparently they are reversible. But once the baby's 91 days, you can't. You've all heard of spina bifida. One of the lawsuits I lodged against the FDA was over folic acid supplementation and prenatal vitamins. Until we sued them, there was no law requiring folic acid and prenatal vitamins, and babies would be born with spina bifida. This baby also has a zinc deficiency because he's got club feet. This baby has a gluten intolerance because he's born with no hair. All this is avoidable by perfect nutrition and corrective diets before conception. Whose fault is this? This kind of stuff? The OBGYN. I told you that I discovered the first non-human case of cystic fibrosis in a rhesus monkey at Yerkes Primate Center in Atlanta, Georgia, Emory University. And, of course, they fired me for saying it wasn't genetic. And about 5 years ago, we began to send Jerry Lewis papers and records of kids whose muscular dystrophy had been reversed. We had learned the cause, prevention, and cure of muscular dystrophy in animals in 1957, and over the years I had used it every once in a while. I'd see a muscular dystrophy kid, and we were able to reverse it, and I'd see another one 3 or 4 years later, and we'd be able to reverse it. But it wasn't big enough numbers to make any impact on science. Well, about 5 years ago, one of our associates, Marvin Ropp, who was a Navy SEAL, but he started out as an Amish kid. When he reached 18, he shaved his beard off, gave his team of horses to his brother, joined the Navy, and became a Navy SEAL, very highly decorated. He came back, and he was just really offended because the medical doctors were using the Amish as an ATM machine, telling him all their diseases were genetic, and there's nothing to do about it, and they were just ripping these poor people off. So we gave Jerry Lewis all the paperwork on dozens and dozens of muscular dystrophy kids that their doctors said were cured. Their doctors said the genetic markers had been reversed, and the symptoms all went away. The biopsies said they're normal. And so Jerry Lewis got excited. He said, Jerry, we don't want any money. We've already spent the time and money and effort. We now know what we believe is the cause, prevention, and cure of muscular dystrophy. Do you want to be the one? These are Jerry's kids. You want to be the one to make the announcements? He got excited. He took all this data to the medical committee of Muscular Dystrophy Foundation, and they fired Jerry Lewis 4 years ago. That's why he's not doing the telethon anymore. They fired Jerry Lewis. He's not sick. He's not dead. He's doing shows in Vegas every night. They fired Jerry Lewis. Somebody needs to go to jail. Well, in 1989, with Ma Lan, I went to China and went to Qishan province, China. Why did I go there? Because everybody knows the Qishan disease, which occurs in 13 out of every 1,000 kids there, is a cardiomyopathy heart disease. So sudden heart death is caused by deficiency of selenium. We know a deficiency of selenium is the cause of cystic fibrosis and the cause of muscular dystrophy. And I reasoned that if this is true, and everybody, including the World Health Organization, agreed that Keyshawn disease is cardiomyopathy heart disease caused by a selenium deficiency, there had to be some kids there in China with cystic fibrosis and muscular dystrophy. And experts, when I asked them about it, they said, no, come on, Wallach. Cystic fibrosis and muscular dystrophy only occur in white kids from Eastern European origin. Well, I knew that wasn't true because I had autopsied black kids and Oriental kids, Asian kids that had these diseases, cystic fibrosis and muscular dystrophy, so I knew that couldn't be true. So we went there. Passed all the tests, did everything we needed to do to satisfy the Chinese government that we knew we were doing. They were going to get their credit for it. And did 1,700 autopsies in kids under the age of 10. 595 of them, exactly 35%, had cystic fibrosis and 100% had muscular dystrophy. Publish it in English. Publish it, okay, in the Journal of Trace Element Research. Very well-respected scientific journal in the United States. The equivalent journals in Chinese in China. Sent copies to the Muscular Dystrophy Foundation, to the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation, never heard a word from them. Somebody needs to go to jail. You all have heard of cerebral palsy. Cerebral palsy is one of these gradient diseases. It's a gradient disease, different degrees of severity. Baby's born with 10% of his cerebellum, which is the part of the brain that's damaged when you have cerebral palsy. 10% damage, 10% underdevelopment. The baby's going to kind of walk like Charlie Chaplin, and with braces and some physical therapy, they can kind of circumvent that disability. If they have a 25% underdevelopment of their cerebellum, they kind of flop around a little bit and with their arms and hands and upper body as well as their legs, and you know they have cerebral palsy. If they have 50% development, they're going to be restricted to a wheelchair. This girl here has 90% underdevelopment of her cerebellum, the size of a grape instead of a tangerine. And you can see her, she has clamps on her head and holding it up. Since she was born, and she's 11 years old here, since she was born, people have to wipe her bottom. Here she is, it's now 2 years later, after this picture was taken. She's now 13, she's 11 in this picture. She's going through puberty. Somebody's gonna have to change her tampons, wipe her bottom, feed her, do everything for her. Give her massages 3 or 4 times a day to prevent pressure ulcers, all this machinery that's needed to move her around, care, extraordinary care. It's $5 million a year for that child. There's 10,000 babies born with this disease in America every year. Whose fault is that? OBGYN. Totally preventable. This is the part of the brain that's underdeveloped when you have the cerebellum, when you have cerebral palsy. Same way with belly button hernias. It's a gradient disease. Here's a pretty typical belly button hernia the size of a walnut. Just you give that baby a hypnotic either by injection or gas. Puts a local anesthesia around that. 10 minutes, the procedure is done. You've repaired that belly button hernia, but the baby shouldn't have to go through that. Okay? Mama was missing something during pregnancy for that to happen. This next one, the baby was born dead of vascular shock because the defect went from the 2 inches below the belly button through the belly button to 2 inches above it, and there's no skin over it, and the stomach and the spleen and some of the intestines are hanging out, and you can see well, why didn't the OBGYN know that that baby was suffering from vascular shock? Well, he was in the bathroom giving himself drugs. This one here, the defect goes from the pubic bone all the way to the middle of the chest, and here the liver and the stomach, the spleen, and all the intestines are hanging out. You can see how that baby would die from vascular shock being born that way. Where was the OBGYN? That baby's perfect. Brain is perfect, lungs are perfect, heart's perfect, liver's perfect, everything's perfect. It died from vascular shock because all its insides are hanging out during birth. That baby, if it was delivered by cesarean section, would be alive today. Somebody needs to go to jail here. Same with cleft palate. It's a gradient disease, different degrees of severity. Whether you're rich or poor, if the mother's deficient in zinc in the first 3 to 7 weeks of pregnancy, you can get cleft palate and many other defects. Kids are born deaf, congenital deafness. Doctors want you to believe it's genetic, and they're raising money. They have all these funds to raise money to prevent, change the genes, fix the genes. It's caused by a deficiency of a single mineral called manganese, not magnesium, manganese. Deficiency in the first 3 to 7 weeks of pregnancy causes congenital deafness. This new book that pharmacist Ben talked about when he introduced me is called Epigenetics. Epigenetics tells you that the genetic theory of disease transmission is one of those dead theories. There is not a single disease that's transmitted genetically. The death of the genetic theory of disease transmission. The death of the genetic theory of disease transmission. There's thousands of dead theories from the medical trade in the halls of science. And the epigenetics tells you that these diseases that are said to be genetic are preventable, and many of them reversible with nutritional supplementation prior to conception. A lot of diseases that, like Huntington's disease, which is a disease that kind of falls in between Parkinson's disease and MS, Lou Gehrig's disease, they're said to be genetic. It occurs in people 50 years of age and older. Come on. Okay, we'll get into that in a little bit. Totally preventable, reversible. The death of the genetic theory of disease transmission. That's me in 1977 with one of my cystic fibrosis monkeys. You've all heard of obesity. Of course, the medical theory and the government's theory of why America is obese and overweight is because we don't exercise enough, we eat too much. Well, following their theory to eat less and exercise more, we became the #1 obese nation in the world. We're #1! The only thing we can brag about being #1 in the health area is we're obese by following their theory. So obviously that theory didn't work. So what causes obesity? What causes people to be overweight if it's not lack of exercise and eating too much? Well, it's a simple nutritional deficiency. You take the nutrients and it goes away. We'll get into that in some detail if we have time. Multiple sclerosis, a disease that historically occurred primarily in people between the ages of 30 and 60. MS. Today, in the last 10 years, the peak of the demographic curve of who gets MS are kids under the age of 12. They're even diagnosing MS now in 10-month-old babies. 10-month-old babies. How's that happening? Free radical damage to the myelin of the brain. Free radical damage to the myelin of the brain. Well, why is it now we're getting it in young babies, 10 months old, and it used to be in people 50 years old? That's because our babies are getting free radicals damaging their myelin of the brain. Well, where are they getting the free radicals? Apple juice. What happens when you cut an apple in half and leave it exposed to the air without putting lemon juice on it? It turns brown. What's turning brown in the apple? It's oxidation of the oil in the apple. Apple juice is not taken care of very well. It's one of the first non-formula things you give a baby is, you know, an ounce of apple juice and 8 ounces of water in a little bottle. They're giggling, they're happy. But the free radicals that build up because of the apple juice oxidizing, the oil in the apple juice oxidizing, causes MS in little babies. Thrombotic stroke, again, used to be in people over the ages of 50, 60, 70. Now, the peak of the demographic curve are kids under the age of 18. How's that happening? Well, thrombotic stroke doesn't occur because of genetics. Thrombotic stroke doesn't occur just out of dumb luck. It's caused by an omega-3 essential fatty acid deficiency, a ratio problem between omega-3s, 6s, and 9s. That's another one of my lawsuits against the FDA. Because I prevailed in federal court, I can legally say that you can actually prevent thrombotic stroke. You can prevent pulmonary embolism. You can prevent coronary thrombosis and deep vein thrombosis simply by supplementing with omega-3 essential fatty acids and having a perfect ratio between omega-3s, 6s, and 9s. Before I sued them and won in federal court, I couldn't say that without getting put in jail. How many of you give your kids and grandkids under the age of 5 1,000 milligrams of supplemental omega-3s every day? Gosh, I don't see any hands going up. That's why your kids are going to die before you from MS and stroke and stuff like that. Heart attacks, Keyshawn disease, cardiomyopathy, heart disease. So how come this is happening now? Why are they getting all these strokes? We didn't get strokes until we were in our 50s, 60s, 70s. That's because we were getting omega-3s when we were kids. Well, wait a minute, we didn't supplement. Well, yeah, you did. It was in egg yolks. Our kids now are living on Fruity Pebbles and apple juice, Sunny Delight, and shredded wheat, Welch's grape juice, and Cheerios. How many omega-3s are in them? Nothing, nothing, 0, 0. You better be supplementing your kids and your grandkids before they're conceived, all through the pregnancy they're developed in, from the moment they're born, with all 90 essential nutrients, and you'll avoid all this stuff. Now, the most politically charged of all of the congenital events, birth defects, if you will, is another one of these gradient diseases like belly button hernias, cerebral palsy. It's totally 100% preventable, but once the baby is born, it's irreversible. Homosexuality in both males and female occurred in the first 3 to 7 weeks of pregnancy. There's a part of the brain called the preoptic hypothalamus that controls not your gender, but controls who you go after for sex. Your gender is determined genetically, but there's a piece of your brain that determines who you will go after for sex, a boy or a girl. Okay? And it can be different from your genetic sex, and that's what happens with homosexuality, asexuality, hermaphrodites, all that kind of stuff, because what goes on up here is different from your genetic sex. Now, intersex babies, ones that are, they're hermaphrodites, they have both male and female parts. The medical system in America, they will look for bar bodies, which is the second female hormone, chromosome, second female chromosome, called a bar body. And you can see that every nucleus of the white blood cell in a blood sample from a newborn baby that has a hermaphrodite has both the male and female parts. When they have the bar bodies, they're a female genetically. And here's some real, this is a line drawing obviously, but here's bar bodies in some real XX female blood smears, and you can see in a male XY, there's nucleoli because it's getting ready to divide, but there's no bar bodies. Bar bodies are totally different than the nucleoli, all right? And so when they find a baby that is a hermaphrodite, but they have bar bodies, they will surgically remove the penis and the testicles, do a little plastic surgery, and beat their chest and say, I did good for this baby. Well, 85% of the time when the baby's born hermaphrodite, up here in their preoptic hypothalamus, they're a male. 85% of the time they're a male. And our pediatric surgeons and OBGYNs have done some of the most cruel things to these babies born hermaphrodites. While in Europe and Scandinavia, they wait till the babies are 10 years old, because by the time they're 10 years old, the babies know which one they are in their preoptic hypothalamus. They have both parts, and you ask the baby, they're 10 years old. Well, are you got both parts there, Frank. I mean, it's obvious, you know that. But really, which one are you? Are you a girl or boy? So, well, I'm a boy. And so they cut off the vagina and the ovaries and do some plastic surgery and make him a boy, even though genetically it might be a female. It's the kindest thing to do it that way. One more, and then I'll show you the part of the brain that's afflicted, and then we'll get to the bottom line here. This fellow here, very famous eye surgeon in Central California. His name is Richard. And Richard fathered several cute kids, was very famous for dealing with laser surgery to tack down detached retinas. He was very active in his church. He was very active in things like the Rotary Club, Rotary International, and the Lions Club, raising money for projects. But when his last child reached 18 years of age, he went from Central California to Denver, Colorado, had his penis and testicles amputated, had a vagina made, had breast implants, got hormone treatments, and went from Richard to Renee. Because since he was 10 years old, he knew up here that he was a she. Now, this is a part of the brain that's afflicted. This is not a part of the brain that's necessary for life. I mean, you cut this brain off here, you're going to die. You cut this part of the brain off, you're going to be a vegetable and just lay there like a worm. You cut this part of the brain off, you're going to be dead. But this little peninsula here, the preoptic hypothalamus, about the size of my little finger, if there's no cells in there, there's about 400 cells in there normally. If there's no cells in there, the individual is asexual. Everybody has a crazy Aunt Ruthie or crazy Uncle Frank, who the legend goes, They went on a date when they were 20, and their boyfriend or girlfriend jilted them. I don't know how you can jilt somebody after one date, but they said they jilted them, and they never went out again because they were so wounded from being jilted after that one date, and they died never having gotten married. Well, they were asexual. They just really weren't interested in sex, but everybody else was going on dates, so they thought they'd try it once and so on. If there's a few more cells in there, say 25 to 50, they're bisexual. They love having orgasms, but they don't care if it's a male or female. You get a few more cells in there. It depends on what part of that preoptic hypothalamus is involved. Let's say you got 150 cells in there now, but they're in one place, which drives you to chase boys. But genetically, you're a male. You're being told by your preoptic hypothalamus to chase boys. Okay, you're a male homosexual. If you're a female, and it tells you to chase females, you're a lesbian. You have 250 cells to 400 cells, you're heterosexual. That's how it works. Totally preventable. However, after the baby's born, can't go back. You can't put the genie back in the bottle.